to remind parents that the teenage brain, it isn't, it's 13 and they start. No, the teenage brain starts developing by the time they're 9, 10 years old, especially on girls. So those thoughts, those emotions, those feelings, those hormones, they start at like way earlier than we think. And that's why I keep honing on the fact that we need to have those conversations before they even hear it, before they even, I know I had the sex conversation with my kids the summer of 3rd and 4th grade, because here in Texas, they teach it in the 4th grade. So I wanted to have it before that. And like I said, everything. So it's being proactive and so, you being okay with having the uncomfortable conversation.
Hey, it's Tiffany and Lorraine Galloway, the certified high performance coach with the Resilient Mother podcast. And we were recording and we just started hitting on some subjects that we realized moms really need some support on. So we're going to talk about having the hard conversations with your kids, because there are some subjects that are out there that are pervasive, that are, talking about sex, suicide attempts, technology. There are just some things that we got into and we were discussing and realized some other moms need to hear this too. So come along with us as we discuss some of this deeper stuff that is going on today, so you don't feel like you're alone and you have some tools and know what to do. Who'd like to start?
Hi there. So I'm Catherine Tyson. Thank you all so much. Tiffany, this is awesome. Absolutely. These are conversations that need to be had. There's so much going on in our world that's just shaking things up and not in a good way. And so Xochitl, thank you so much for staying on with us to chat about these really important issues that you work with on a regular basis. Yes. So what would you say? I think we can start with maybe a question, because you do it every day, right? What would you say are some of your common questions or concerns that your teenagers that you work with would have, or parents?
Yes. So my clients are mostly teenagers. So I get a lot of the information in my research from them so that I can coach parents with this. But 98% of the teenagers that I've seen for the last 15 years, and I have between 10 and 20 clients per week, is I can't talk to my parents because I just can't open to them about that. So it's about having those hard conversations, because parents, sometimes we're not prepared, or we think that they're too young. We are uncomfortable ourselves about having certain conversations about sex, alcohol, drugs, cutting, suicide, and things like that. And we don't think our kids know anything about it, or they shouldn't know. And if a lot of parents think that if I talk to my kid about it, then I'm going to plant the seed instead of being something that's going to help them. So be proactive.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so unfortunately today, if you don't, we were talking about this just a minute ago, of like, if you don't talk to them about it, someone else is. I think parents are aware enough right now to know that if they don't talk to their kids about sex, they're going to get exposed to it somewhere. But it's all these other things too. Anything that is very important that we just discussed, it happened to me and I couldn't believe it. I had no idea my 12-year-old had been exposed to those things at school.
Right.
At school, they have the world in their hands. They have the world in their hands. If you put parent controls and things like, they find a way, and information will find its way. So it is so important for us. If we're the first ones to bring up any of those hard conversations, we're the first ones to expose them to that. They'll remember that, and they'll know that they'll take us as the experts on the subject, even though we're not the experts. But they'll know, oh, you know what? If mom talked about that, then that means I can talk to her about that. If mom talked about sex, it's safe.
And do you have the better information? So their peers are going to be talking about it, but they might have some foolish version of it, wherein you're going to have a healthier version of it. So you can't shy away from those conversations. And I think there are still some very old-fashioned parents that will say, "Oh, you're too young to even be talking about that. Stop thinking about that." That doesn't mean they're not thinking about it. Yes. So it's better for us to leave those lines of communication. I remember when my daughter in particular, or even my sons, would talk about stuff. I remember just being like inside going, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to have this conversation. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it, blah, 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 blah." But just acting as if I was not listening because I needed her to continue talking, or I needed him to continue talking. Right. And so like moving away from my feeling of, should we be having these conversations? Honey, if your children are talking about it, yes, you should.
Yeah, and here's,
because the conversations
here's an
exist.
interesting scenario that happened in the last town I was in. I had to bring it to the principal's attention at the school because my daughter had an episode. All the other kids who had issues started coming to her because she has a tender heart. Well, they started trying to be each other's counselor. They were trying to keep what was going on and the things that kids were going through, even in the middle of the night, calling each other and being like, if you don't talk to me, I'm going to kill myself. Like there were some crazy things going on that adults should have been involved. But these kids were allowed, they were making their own space to talk about it because no adults were giving them the space to talk about it, or they felt too ashamed to talk about it because they thought they would be shunned or they would be judged or all these things. And so the school had to turn around and kind of have a meeting and go, okay, here's when it's appropriate and it's not. It's great you guys want to help each other, but there's a point in which an adult needs to be involved, especially when safety is an issue. You guys can't put that pressure on each other or on one person.
So even bringing that conversation to our children about, hey, if you hear about this, if you hear somebody else is cutting, if you hear somebody else wants to commit suicide, come and talk to me and let me help. Let me, and as a therapist, my kids will come to me. It's like, hey, mom, my sis or my friend is doing this. My other friend is vaping and things like that. And we have to watch whenever our kids are talking to us about those hard conversations. It doesn't matter how uncomfortable we are, to keep a straight face, because if we react, that's where this information is going to stop. So I trained as a forensic interviewer for the county, and that's a forensic interviewer for sexually abused kids. So that I had a huge full year of just training not to react to the story of what the child is telling me. And some of the most horrible nightmares, stories that I could hear, but not to react, because that way they will give you more information. So let's remember not to react to when they're telling you, like, I feel like cutting, I feel like suicide. And it's like, okay, let's stay calm. There's nothing we cannot solve together, and then go from there. And then cry at night, go cry in your room after you're done talking to your kid and have done the safety plan or whatever you need to do, but that's so key.
And I think you just hit on something that people don't know. Being someone who's been suicidal, being very transparent here, haven't been there for years, people. I'm fine. But being there, all I wanted was someone to be there in it with me while I figured myself out, because I didn't understand what I was dealing with at all. Or I had so much pain that I wanted it to stop, but I didn't know how to make it stop. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the strategies. Heck, a hug sometimes would have maybe been enough, but there was so much shame in even expressing it. So often it's that scary reaction that people give that really will throw them the other way or into it deeper, because you isolate when you're suicidal. You pull away from people. You got this in your head that you're different, that you don't matter, that
you're drowning. You feel like you're drowning and
want to run. But if someone shows up and is just love, just be there and
present,
love, and just be there. You don't even have
to. And you made
things sometimes,
you
made
a great point as well, Tiffany. You made a great point, Tiffany, of being alone. So relationships are very important. So parents, creating a relationship with your children is of paramount importance. And I kept thinking about, from the first time we were talking with Xochitl, we were talking about, I don't know if you mentioned like your parents or something, and I think Tiffany, and I was thinking about my own mom, who is to me a hot mess in many ways, and as adults, like we hit heads a lot because we're very different women. But she was an amazing mother to me when I was a teenager, because she was literally my best friend. Like, she took me to parties, she'd drive me there, and she'd park the van down the street and sleep and wait, to take me home. Like, there were so many kids that were like, your mom is so cool, and I just remember, like, honestly being able to talk to her about anything. And she got pregnant when she was 15. So that was her way of ensuring that those things didn't happen to me. Like, that was her biggest fear for me. And then she had a daughter when I was 17, another daughter when I was 17. So her fear for her girls was, I don't want the same thing to happen to you that happened to me. And the way that she did it, the proactive way that she did it, was to always be our friend, always be not just our friend, because she was a mother as well. Because right now she'd tell you straight, I'm your mother, don't talk to me like that, And so, but she was there, and she was, she was available. Exactly. She was a present mother as a teenager. And I love that. And that's one thing I would say to parents. Ensure that you are a voice in your children's head. Ensure that your children trust you, that they can come to you and they know anything they bring to you. You know, and that was one of the things that I did with my children as well. It doesn't matter. As long as you're not lying to me, we're going to work this out. I don't want to lie, but we're going to work it out. And so that's one thing, you know, being in your children's life because they need that, which, you know, with Tiffany saying you felt alone so much of the time. And that's why these thoughts were there. But also supervision is very important. And I'm going to say this because this is one of my Achilles heels. I think that sometimes parents think that little kids need to be watched and little kids, you need to be there for little kids. That's true. Yes. But if you have sufficient childcare and you trust them and they're good, decent people that help you with your little kids, that's amazing. But your teenagers also need supervision. They do not need, they look like they're able to come and go as they please. This is not 100% figured out yet. So you need to be in their lives. You need to be, honey, my teenagers, I was home at 3:00. They got out of school 3:00. I picked them up at 3:00. Like literally, that was my thing. Like I realized that very early on that you need to be there. They need the supervision because they're developing this brain of theirs. And if you're not an influence in their life, everything else, and worse now that we have all this technology, because technology is ready to ruin your children right now, you know? And we'll give them access to things like suicide. That's what technology is doing to your kids, you know, glamorizing stuff. I mean, I've heard horror stories of people filming their suicide. Like, what is happening? You know, so
it's gotten so out of control. And
100%.
And another thing is that you're there physically. Like my mother was a stay-at-home mom. She was there like she was physically there, but emotionally she was not there because she was worried about other things. So and that a lot of the times that's why I felt alone. She was right there in the next room, but she didn't build that communication with me that I needed because I need a lot of emotional connection. So she wasn't there emotionally. So I felt alone a lot of the times.
Supervision is not just being there. Supervision is not just being in the house. Supervision is knowing what they're doing.
Exactly.
Supervision is knowing, you know, and I always thought about this and, you know, luckily at that time, I will be in that again at some point because I have a little one. But luckily at that time, you know, I was able to control their outside world. And I think parents still can. It doesn't matter what technology is around you, you still can control that. So, you know, at a certain time, telephones were off and on the table because I wanted to ensure that whatever outside forces that they were interacting with, I knew about it as much as I could. And if they're in the room with their little phones, I don't know who they're talking to. I don't know what's being said. You know, even computers were not in their rooms. It was always in the main areas of the house because I knew that they could click on certain things and then something pornography might come up. So I was that parent. And it wasn't this restrictive house. It was just to keep them safe from learning things that they didn't need to learn or they didn't need to be exposed to, you know, at that age. So I think parents need to really kind of buckle up and understand this is a big job, right? And you have to be there. So not just supervise your supervision, but you're not talking to your kids. No, absolutely. You need to know, how was your day? What's happening? You know, I mean, however you do that, you know?
Yeah. And I didn't realize until recently, my parents have been in politics. So my dad was sharing with me, other countries have banned the ability for porn, for different things to be on any kind of device or private information, recording your kid's voice. But for some reason in the United States, there's a lot of things being allowed that shouldn't be, just like in foods right now, we allow a lot of things that other countries don't. So we have to take a stand as parents and be educated on what's going on and what the changes are, because we're going to have to be the ones to change it for that next generation, or they're going to become subject to this marketing psychology used against us. So
And I will
Right.
take it even a step further. I know Catherine mentioned the phones and computers in the living room. I will take them into your bedroom because I'm telling you, my teenagers that come to my office, they're like, yeah, I wake up at 2:00 in the morning and go check in on the boyfriend. So I would take it even a step, not that,
You
if you
see?
trust your kids and things like that, but kids will find a way. And
Okay.
we all did,
So,
Yeah.
can I say this too? I remember when my children, especially my sons, were teenagers. I remember hearing an interview, and I believe it was Snoop Dogg, and he said, "I don't let my kids listen to my music."
Oh,
And so I walked away from that like, okay, thank you, Snoop. So here's the thing, my kids are not going to be listening to Eminem. My kids are not going to be like literally what was happening during that time. I said, you're not listening to those because those people are saying, I don't let my kids listen to this. So here's what I'm going to ensure. They're not going to ruin my kids for me because they don't want their kids ruined. And so one of my sons is 30 something. The other day he said, Mommy, I remember when you said that to me about Snoop Dogg. He said, and that is so true because now he's like the strict guy, he's a father. And he's just like, Mommy, that made so much.
Yeah.
I thought about the other day. I said, boy, my mom was ahead of her time. I said, because I'm hearing an actual entertainment artist saying, I don't let my children listen to my music. So why should my children be influenced by your music? You clearly know it's not for children. So parents have to be very proactive. You got to know what they're listening to. You got to know who their friends are. You got to know where they are. Listen, I was in and out of people's house. Parents couldn't stand me. Why is she in my house? Well, if my children are in your house, I need to know what's happening in here. So I need to do a walkthrough. Sure. I'm going to do a walkthrough or they're not hanging out here. Sorry. I don't care. People literally were like, oh God, here she comes again. You bet.
Same. Yeah.
These are my treasures. Hello.
We go back to having those hard conversations about talking to your kids about the music of Snoop Dogg and about drugs. And again, it's like, oh, weed. Like, what is that? What do you know first about? Like asking your kid, what do you know about it? And then give them the proper information. Yeah. And you know what? Like I said, I don't lie to my kids about, the sex talk. I remember my ex-husband and I sat him on the room with us. Like he grew up very Baptist, very conservative, never had the talk with his parents, but I had him sit there. I was like, because I need you to be there so that our girls know that they can come to you too. And so he turned colors and everything. Well, because I had books and I had pictures and everything and showing parts and naming the parts for what they were and things like that. And explaining all the physical, the physical changes that happens. And he was so uncomfortable, but I was so glad that he sat there and we co-parent right now and we do a very good job. But now my girls know. I mean, my oldest is like, hey, Dad, can you order my birth control? And Dad's like, okay, don't tell me anymore. I just need to know that you're taking it and that's it. But opening that conversation about the songs, about the music, about the curse words, about, all these things. And you being open to that conversation so they can come to you and say, you can have a conversation with me. I'm your mom, but you can have a conversation.
You can start a lot younger than you think. Like my kids, when they were really little, if we watched a movie, we watched a movie. There were no commercials. And then when they were finally introduced to commercials, they kind of were like, what the heck is this? But I was like, ooh, opportunity. Now, I'm going to tell you this, guys. If they have to give you an ad to sell it to you, you probably don't need it because they had to pay for an ad.
Right.
So they're just trying to trick you. And so my kids are smart when commercials come on. They go like, I don't need that. But I had to teach them that. And that's the thing that's going on today is the marketers and everyone, it's our attention. And they are doing it in a way that it's addictive. They're doing it in a way that it's fast judgment. Do I like this? Do I not like this? And there's no depth. And it's why we're having so many problems, especially with teens. They're developing their brain, and then their brain's developing that way where they're not creating depth, where they're not going deeper in relationships or deeper in conversation, and they're quick to judge. Right. And that's where the problem is. And then if they know that, then they get kind of pissed off that hey, they're trying to do this. And then you're more proactive to want to fight with you on it and go, no, they're not going to do that to me.
Yes. And I always remind parents that the teenagers...
Tiffany. It's so funny you're saying that because Tracy Chapman has a song and it says, we've got a box to put in your brain, hardwired for downloading. It's
Mm.
so long ago this song was, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, right? And it was just basically saying, I'm going to tell you how you should think. I'm going to tell you what you should feel. I'm going to tell you what you like, what you don't like, what you should like, what you shouldn't like. And I thought that was brilliant. And I'm telling you, that was way over 10 years ago. And so these are the things those are the things that my kids grew up hearing, not Snoop Dogg. But yes, you have
I like
to
to remind parents that the teenage brain, it doesn't, it's 13 and they start, no, the teenage brain starts developing by the time they're 9, 10 years old, especially on girls. So those thoughts, those emotions, those feelings, those hormones, they start at like way earlier than we think. And that's why I keep honing on the fact that we need to have those conversations before they even hear it, before they even, I know I had the sex conversation with my kids the summer of 3rd and 4th grade, because here in Texas, they teach it in the 4th grade. So I wanted to have it before that. And like I said, everything. So it's being proactive and so, you being okay with having the uncomfortable conversation. Hey, have you heard anybody cutting in your school? Like, what do you think that is? How do they do it? What do you know about it? Tell me more. Have you ever thought about it? Have you ever thought about suicide? Have you ever thought about killing yourself? And if they say yes, ask more questions without that reaction, so they give you more information, and then you freak out, and then you call a therapist on the when you're in your room. But it's getting the information from them, and then if it's something that is serious, then keep a watch on them, and then until like, you know what, we're gonna figure this out. And I love you, and remind them every day. Mom, my kids are like, Mom, again, another hug, another because I love you, and there's nothing we cannot figure out together.
Yes.
And
it's funny
like, follow your gut. Like, don't hesitate. If you need to take them into a counselor and have a crisis session, go. If you need to go to the ER, go. Like, trust your gut on what action to take.
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny because in this line of work that I'm in now, I remember 20 years ago being a young, 20-something years ago being a young social worker. And 20-something years ago, I was shocked at how many 11 and 12-year-old girls were having sex.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Shocked. I'm telling you, I was 30, so I was shocked. I could not, I was so naive, and I'm in an island. We're not even a big city. So imagine big cities. And I'm thinking, no, come on, you're 10, you're 11. No, come on. Literally, I remember having like teenage clients that were saying they had started having sex at 11. And they were starting, and I'm like, who is having sex with an 11-year-old child? You don't even know anything. Like, you're still wearing Barbie panties. Like, are you serious? So parents don't need to be naive with this. It is scary. It is uncomfortable. It is hurtful. It's devastating, but you need to know that your children are being exposed to all sorts of things. You would be surprised who would be talking to your kids about certain things that are inappropriate. And if you are not having conversation with your kids, you will not know that they're having those conversations with those adults. Sometimes it's adults having these conversations with kids.
Right. Can I add that I think I only came across this because I teach kids. I often taught dance or gymnastics or different things. So they now require you to take training to understand what the predators are and how they groom a child into these things. And I think every parent should take these certifications. Here in Utah, it's required for anyone in the school district, anyone working with kids. And Utah has a pervasive amount of child abuse and molestation, unfortunately. And it's usually someone they know, or it's someone you know. It's not this complete weird freako stranger.
89% of the time, if not more.
Yeah. It's a cousin, it's an uncle, or it's the neighbor boy, or it's at church, or
exactly.
Right. But you have to know what those things are, because they're often people who seem great on the outside. And one of the things that they do is like wanting special alone time with your kid, and that it makes sense. But and that's one of the things I think parents should pay attention to. Oh, your child is special, or your child's a protege. Yeah. Oh, I need you to work one-on-one with me. That is like a huge red flag.
Yes.
You always around.
Which is why you need to know. Which is why you need to know who's in the homes that your children are going to be in. Oh, who's Uncle Bob? Who's that cousin? Who's this neighbor? Because it is true. And I remember also I go back to when I was in high school, and I remember always, I had a particular teacher. I won't say the subject because people will know if they're watching it. And I just remember the girls sitting on his desk. And I remember them getting the good grades. And I remember them always, just sitting there. And he was handsome and he was young. And I remember I never wanted to do that. And he didn't like me. He completely did not like me because I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to be sitting on his desk. Like, what,
Right.
I just couldn't stand him. So you'll be surprised who the predators are. Like you said, Tiffany, it's not just that freak out that's looking like trying to, it's people
No.
It's people that are being
too. Or online too. Like they had to shut down. Disney had to shut down this complete fairy world with Tinkerbell because predators penetrated it, knowing that kids were on there.
Yeah.
Wow.
You have got to know
And
online
and talk.
What are your kids doing? What are they on? Who are they talking to?
Yes, and talk to your kids about that too. Like I said, I was I think it was in the other episode, but I was a forensic interviewer for a couple of years for the county here in Houston, and forensic interview. I interviewed kids that were sexually abused, so a predator, and training the kids and telling the kids what the body parts were. I remember my little one; she's the one that I have 90% of my stories on. She was 4 years old. We're all Old Navy. And she's 16 now, so you can tell how long ago this was. But this is with the time that I was a forensic interviewer. And we were on Navy, we were at the line. And there's a male mannequin standing with skinny jeans. My daughter is like, she touches the mannequin in his special places. Mom, this man doesn't have a
penis.
Yes. I didn't know if I could say that or not. I was like, I turned. And there's a line. And I pulled out my card. I was like, ma'am, I'm a counselor. This is my line of work. My kids they know this is, this is what we do. This is not what, so again, it's telling the kids, I know it's a funny story, but I was very proud of my kid for like, this is confusing, but it's like, she knew what the body parts were. She knows nobody touches your part and you don't, things like that. So
but that's how we
look for in predators. Anybody giving you any gift.
Yes.
And that's how we stop them. We have these conversations. We don't make it
Have
embarrassing that a
those
4-year-old knows
hard
the difference between the parts.
Having the hard conversations. You have to have them. And that is funny because
I'd be embarrassed in public.
I remember my 5-year-old coming home and asking me, what's a condom? 5 years old. She said, what's a condom? I would have never had a condom conversation with my 5-year-old. But guess what? There was a little kid in her class that had one in his hand and said, this is what I use on my girlfriend. So I had to talk to his mom about it because obviously he was connecting. So his mother was exposed. He was being exposed to something. So he's showing it to everybody. This is what I use on my girlfriend. And she goes, Mommy, what's a condom? So 5 years old. So that's the thing. It's having these hard conversations because they are being had. And that is how, Tiffany, like you just said, that's how we keep them safe. We have to keep our children safe. Seriously,
get rid of those.
It's an epidemic.
Yes. We have to get rid of our own shame, of our own guilt, of our own experience, of our own trauma, so we can have these conversations openly with our kids without, like I said, my ex was like all kinds of colors, but he was brave enough to like, I know this is important, and knowing that it's important. It doesn't matter if you're turned all kinds of colors. If you're there for your kid, that's what they're gonna remember.
Yeah, ignorance absolutely not bliss. We do not live in an ignorant, naive, pure world anymore.
Not anymore.
Yes.
We're
not. We're not.
And sorry.
We have to raise them. We have to raise them in a healthy way. We want them to be thinking people. We want them to know certain things. We don't want the information that's coming from other people that may be bringing harm to them. We want to make sure that we're there and we're keeping it healthy, and we're keeping those lines of communication open. Lady, this has been amazing. I mean, we could go on forever. This is like, this is good stuff, but parents just need to be vigilant because I believe, even as a social worker, when I even work with parents that are not quote unquote the best parents, like I see they're doing a lot of stuff, and I'll grab their hand and say, I'm walking with you hand in hand, honey, because I know you love your kid.
Right.
I know you love your kid. I know that I don't love my kids any more than you. You guys love your kids. You would beat me right now if I did something to your kids, you know?
Right.
So let's do this together because parents love their children. So if we love them, we have to love them enough and love them in a healthy way in order for them to be healthy individuals so that when, you know, they have a fighting chance in this world when they're adults. That's the whole thing. We want them to have a fighting chance.
And part of being
Absolutely.
resilient is asking for help when you need the help.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's learning and growing and making the mistake and say, you know what, I really don't know what I'm doing. Let me call a professional. And having that moment of, like I said, that's part of your resilience. That's part of growing and learning.
Yes.
More. So,
yeah. And I will say with all the
things
I've been through, that one thing you just said would have helped me a lot. If you feel like if someone would have just said, instead of saying, trying to help, trying to do what they thought would help, instead of just asked, what do you need?
Right.
How can I help?
Right.
Or then hearing it and knowing they couldn't be that for me, just admitting I can't be that for you. I can't help you with that right now, and not diminishing my need, not diminishing my ask. It was brave to ask. Okay? It was brave for me to ask help at all.
Yes.
Don't diminish it and say I'm asking too much. Say I am not the person for you, or I don't have the resources for this, and go find the person who does.
Well,
or
let
the
me
person
find that. Let me find it.
Right.
Let me find it for you. Yeah,
even
absolutely.
me as a professional, I still look for help.
Yeah. Absolutely. And also you just hit another great point. As parents, sometimes we might not be the person for our child. Like we have to be there for them. We have to have the supervision. We want to create the relationship. But if there are challenging things, we may just need to bring somebody else in order for them to even hear it 100th time. And they say, oh, wow. And then they'll put it together. Oh, mommy used to say that too. Yeah, I know. Right. Okay. Right. But at that time, they weren't getting it. So, you know, when we talk about trauma in adults, and Xochitl, you work with that. But when we talk about trauma in adults, it didn't just appear when you became an adult. It's all sorts of stuff that's just piled up as you were younger, just kept piling up, and it was never broken down.
Yeah.
So
and trauma is not a memory.
Would be everyone's goal, you know?
Yeah. And trauma is not a memory. Trauma is reactions. So that's how trauma shows up, not as a memory, not like I remember I was abused or I was this or I was that or I was neglected. It's the reaction to a situation. It's the avoidance. It's the, you know, things like that. So, or the coping mechanism, unhealthy coping mechanism a lot of the time. So we have to remember that and be there for our kids. And we've been saying, it's like, if I cannot do it, let me ask for help. And recognize also I know we can talk forever. One last question. Like, for example, my kids, two very different personalities. My oldest always felt more comfortable talking to her dad about things because they have, you know, they're just more open. Dad is more laid back. I was always a disciplinarian. And I had to be okay with, you know what?
That's okay.
Mom, I want to talk to my dad about this. Okay, sweetie, that's fine.
That's okay.
And trust that was a connection and not feel bad and not feel like, why don't you love me? Like, am I not doing a good job? And put it like, it's on me now, instead of giving her the space to express herself. Like, stop making about ourselves. And it's like, okay, you want to talk to your dad, and then me and dad will talk. But she knew that we're all on the same page. But she felt more comfortable with dad, and my little one felt more comfortable with me. So it would, but no, like accepting the fact that, you know what, I may not be the perfect parent, and she feel more comfortable with dad, not because I'm doing a bad job, just because personality is much better, and that's it.
Exactly.
It's nothing personal.
Yeah. And that's it. Absolutely. Yep. Yes. Just do what you need to do for them at the time that they need it. Just be where they are, start where they are, and move your way on out through it, you know? But yeah, definitely. That's just dealing with the hard questions. There are hard questions every day. Ask those. Don't be uncomfortable about that. Be there for your children 100%. Create a relationship with them. You know, supervision is important. Just see them as whole people and face those hard questions because they're being asked and they're being answered by other people.
Right.
Yeah. I just want to echo what we're really here because we want to serve you moms. And we know you love your kids. Right. We know we live in a crazy, changing world. And we just hope that being here with us, you're a good mom. If you're listening to something like this, please give yourself the credit and know that you are enough. We just want to give you some more tools. We just want to speak truth to you so you can be the resilient mother you always want to be, and that we can also raise the next resilient generation. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being willing to listen to some hard stuff here. These are things that we know need to be said. They're just too relevant. They're too pervasive. So that's why we wanted to share. But know we're sharing from our hearts, and that we know your hearts, and we know that you can do it. So I believe in you, believe in yourself. God bless. And we'll see you on another episode of the Resilient Mother podcast.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Thank you for joining us today. Please don't forget to subscribe so we can share this message. We are a worldwide podcast with guests all around the world, and we want to continue to grow this community. You can find us on socials. You could also be a guest. Look for that link below if you'd be interested in being a guest on the podcast. If you know a sponsor or would like to be a sponsor, please reach out to me or Catherine as well.
Sure. We want you all on this journey. We want to hear your stories. We want to share your stories. We want to gain strength from each other, because together we're stronger. And to never forget the blessing of being a mother and what we're creating. We're creating the future every single day of our lives. So get on this train with us and let's do this thing, moms.
I believe in you. Believe in yourself. God bless. And we'll see you around. Take care.